Hello there, and welcome to the Halloweekly Horror Podcast for September 23rd, the Who Won Horror in 2005 episode. Will The Descent claim the prize from the bottom up, or are you going to feel hostile about our final answer? Before we get to the show, make sure you subscribe and leave a review if you can. Anywhere you get your podcasts, we'd really appreciate it. I saw 2 reviews come in last week, but it's still kind of the land of the dead over there. So help us out if you can. Enjoy the show.
So if you're listening for the first time, this is gonna be a fun episode. We're gonna get real scrappy on this one and decide who won the year 2005.
Right. So we did an episode on this before. It was called Who Won Horror in 1987, I believe. And I was like, there's other years that are interesting. So some years actually aren't interesting when you think about, like William Friedkin or William Peter Blatty or whoever won 1973. Like The Exorcist won 1973, right? Like
there's certain years where it's just a no.
Right, but there are years that are interesting. So 2005, I swear I found like 8 different answers to who won horror in 2005 when I was trying to figure out how I was going to answer this question. I had more trouble with this than 87, which is a way better year for horror than 2005.
There's one answer in here that I think most people will sort of, divert their eyes to, but there's a few other years I was looking at, like 2002 is a really interesting one.
Mm-hmm.
2001 I think would actually be a really fun episode to do next because there's it's a dookie year, to be honest.
Well, yeah, but there's a couple of huge curveballs in 2001.
There are, but depending on how you were, what movies you had access to, it might not be the answer.
That's very true. And then it was also, I remember from when we would ask people who listen to the podcast or follow the Facebook page, what was the best horror movie of 83 or 81, or it was almost never clear cut. They were like big time showdown fights between a couple movies that were beloved, and it was always like, you got to pick Lost Boys or Fright Night or whatever, right? So like some of them were just not obvious, and I think this is going to be a really, really fun year. I'm excited to hear because we don't tell each other in advance mostly what the answers are going to be. So I'm really curious to see what you came up with.
And it's not like a single-handed film, by the way.
Right. It's our podcast, no rules. So we can do whatever you want. Like,
yeah, because if we did it by movies, I think there would be a pretty unanimous vote on what it would be.
Well, I don't know if it'd be unanimous. I mean, there's a lot of people where a movie hits them because they saw it at a certain age. I mean, you would think Jason X would be the best horror movie of whatever year.
Wait till we do the 2001. So, buddy, you better believe.
Right? That's what I'm saying. But so there's going to be some niche answers for sure. But if you just did it by critical acclaim, it's pretty clear that Neil Marshall's The Descent would win the year. It won the year in terms of it was both a critical and an audience success. It was actually scary where a lot of horror movies aren't. At least it was actually scary for the time. It was an incredible all-female cast, so it was pushing boundaries ahead of its time, like kind of. So I mean, yeah, for sure. That movie, like, I don't have to fight too hard to say that movie is awesome. But the thing is this, when I was thinking about this, like when I was thinking about like the same formulation for 1987, is it like super clear cut? And I don't know that this is so much better than anything else on the list. Like that it's like just a runaway winner where we don't have to think about it. Because for me, anyway, like I love The Descent. Don't get me wrong. Actually, I have like literal books on the movie The Descent. But it's if you made me pick a desert island choice of taking one of these 2 movies and you made it Land of the Dead or The Descent, I'm taking Land of the Dead, right? So it's not like I could just vote The Descent and walk away. So I was like, we got to fight for some other stuff in this year. I don't know if you felt the same or if you just felt like The Descent got it.
What's that?
Do you think The Descent is so much better than what we're about to talk about?
I think The Descent is extremely good, but I was thinking about it like this, like, Halloween's, October's here in just, a couple days, right? And if, you're doing like a 31 days of Halloween kind of deal and you're planning on a movie, and, you have to use a handful of movies from 2005, would I put The Descent up there?
Right.
And I was looking at some of the other picks and I was like, I don't know.
Right. Like if it's Halloween afternoon and it's about to be dusk, and obviously you're going to pick other, like, whatever, but if you're stuck between The Descent or Skeleton Key, right? Like The Descent's a better movie, but like I feel like Skeleton Key is more of a Halloween.
Like if you put a gun to my head, I would, honest to God, I think say you're having friends over, right? You chowing down some food, having a good time, and you want like a fun, like, horror movie time,
right?
I'd go with House of Wax.
Right? Like, I mean, that's the thing, is you don't generally think fun for certain kinds of horror, at least at the time. It's interesting. It's also interesting how, like, 2005, especially sitting, at this point of the pandemic, is like, well, it feels a long time ago, but there are movies. So, for example, the George C. Scott movie, The Changeling, I can't imagine that was a fun movie of the time, right?
No.
Right? But I have fun watching it now, right? And I might feel the same way about The Descent in 2030. But right now, it's still a very polished, very mean, very interesting horror movie, but not the kind of movie you throw on as like a double bill with like Tucker and Dale or whatever, right? So there are other things going on in this year, but I'm going to be honest with you. There's a movie lurking in this year that I like. I think is legitimately as good as The Descent. That's basically invisible to the horror community, at least from what I can detect, because I've never seen a post. Like our Facebook group is 30,000 members or whatever, and I don't think I've ever seen a post about this movie in 3 years of running the group. Right?
Is it because it's Hellraiser Deader?
No, and I have seen posts about Hellraiser Deader. I'll just give you an example of an absurd statistic. I would imagine I've seen 2,000% more posts about Poltergeist than I have about this movie I'm about to talk about. But that's the thing, is I think there's more in this year than meets the eye, which is part of why I love doing this kind of segment. So, but you hit me first. You got to tell me, pick one that you.
Oh, dude, you're gonna love my. Okay, so we each picked 3 things that we think won the year in a particular order.
Right. So bronze, silver, gold is how I was thinking of it. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Hear me out.
What you got?
So I think the 3rd place winner for the year of 2005, and hear me out, is 6 Minute Abs.
What the hell? I think I just had a stroke. I think you said 6 Minute Abs, right?
That's right. I didn't say 7 Minute Abs.
No,
I said 6.
You didn't say Tybo.
6 Minute Abs.
You didn't. Okay, go ahead.
No. And
9 Inch Nails? Is that what you meant to say?
Nope. We're going with 6 Minute Abs.
All right. So
and this is
tell me
solely because of Ryan Reynolds and Amityville
Horror.
Horror.
My God, that's right.
There's no way, as a dude, you watch the Amityville Horror and you don't think to yourself when it's done, like, maybe I should do a couple crunches before that. maybe it wouldn't hurt.
It's funny because not only did that become legendary instantly, right? There's some things that take time to become legendary, but that became legendary instantly.
Dude, he's like chopping wood shirtless in the rain.
That was the fitness version of the Crispin Glover dance from Friday the 13th. Like, that was...
Dude, his abs are absurd in this movie. Like, they're glistening. They're cut.
But also, who would have thought what Ryan Reynolds would become? Really, I mean, I guess, did we sense it at that point? Where were we with Ryan Reynolds in 2000?
Well, you know what's funny? I'm looking that up. I'm trying to see when the movie Van Wilder came out.
Right.
That would be
right?
Van Wilder was 2002, so I think he was coming off of being, like the funny, kind of dude. So
right.
Amityville Horror kind of
Yeah, he made me think of Mike Judge somehow for a while, and then it just all changed. So, but now he's literally a studio and multimedia entrepreneur and all this incredible shit. So the fact that
back Rick Moranis.
the fact that you're also assigning him the win to the year in horror because of his fucking abs is like Ryan Reynolds is just winning all over the place. Good job.
I mean, let's face it, the Amityville Horror, the Ryan Reynolds one, the Amityville Horror is not, a beacon of great franchise. You know what I mean? Like,
the Amityville Horror is not the seal of quality. Is that what you're trying to tell me?
No, I mean, there's so many of. I think they make one every 4 months.
Yeah.
My math checks.
It's by law.
My math checks out.
It's exactly. It's the only thing. It's the only thing Congress does is they just pass bills mandating the Amityville Horror movies twice a year.
Yeah, because I think the budget they need for it's about $26,000, and you can make yourself another Amityville.
Now I will fight for the first original one and the first sequel, Amityville 2, and also a couple moments down the line, and then the remake I think has some interesting stuff. But you're right. I mean, it's all in all that became a really soggy franchise in terms.
And honestly, I do really enjoy the 2005 Amityville Horror. Like, I was the right age. Like, I think I was middle school at that time, or 8th grade or something like that at that time. So. I mean, the scares were pretty good. Like that bathroom scene, I thought was really. I mean, that's I was when I was looking up photos of 6 minute abs over here. That photo in the bathroom scene came up, and that that creature thing, that little like ghost or whatever is he's got some pretty creepy eyes on him. So
yeah,
kind of wigs me out every time.
Well, it's funny you say that because there was a moment there where. It got weird, or I'm misremembering it. I'm not sure, but I was seeing behind the scenes features about how Ryan Reynolds was in character the whole time. So he was basically like Jack Torrance, but around the clock, right? So that couldn't have been fun for whoever had to like bring him sandwiches or like whatever, right? Because he's like in character as the end stage of The Shining.
You're the PA bringing bagels to set, and he starts shooting at you.
Plus, it's Ryan Reynolds. No one believes you. Like later at the bar, when you're like, everyone's like, "You're not gonna believe what happened to me. I was working with, friggin' Rod Steiger today, and he kicked my ass. Like, he literally kicked me in my ass because he thinks he can get away with anything because he's friends with Frank Sinatra or whatever." And then the other guy's like, you ain't heard nothing. Wait, you hear what Van Wilder was scaring the shit out of me. Like, that's not gonna go over well with. So yeah, I think it's a pretty hilarious choice.
In fact, looking at the photos now, I'm like, man, maybe I should go on a walk or something.
End the podcast. Time to get some.
We'll finish this later.
The podcasting is notoriously bad on the physique. So I like that. I just want to say, because we're going to do more in the series, it's not always going to be amorphous concepts. We did it in 1987 where you just picked a clear winner that's either a person or a movie or a book. Speaking of, what a terrible goddamn year for books this was for horror.
For 2005?
Oh, yeah, because it was the weird phenomenon of this book called The Historian, right? Which was, if you can imagine taking all of the parts of Dracula that are the transition parts where they're writing letters to each other, telling each other like the cucumber sandwiches and tea they were having, and imagine focusing on that instead of Dracula, right? And you got this the historian, and it became this huge phenomenon, and it kind of crowded out. There was a lot of good horror being published that year, like Brian Keene. A lot of other people were doing really interesting stuff. Thomas Ligotti had stuff. He's always amazing, but man, all anyone could talk about was the historian that year. So whatever. Anyway, weird sidetrack. My choice for the winner of horror in 2000. No, the bronze medal. The bronze medal for 2005 in horror is Grit. And you know what's funny is I moved this up from 2 to 3 because it's so interesting how it's knocking against.
Grit.
Yeah, how it's knocking against what you picked, because what you picked was like 6-minute abs, like the picture of health and like whatever. And I'm telling you, man, except for Japanese horror, at least on the mainstream top layer level, 2002 and 3, it felt like kind of horror was really in a weird spot cinematically, right? It was really glossy stuff and urban legendy stuff, and like it was not. It was fine. It was doing what it was doing, but there's a grittiness that horror had. Ironically, since we're talking about The Changeling in the 70s, that came back in a weirdly big way in 2005, and I love how it did it. So here's the funny part. I want to blow your mind while we're on The Descent for a second. So Neil Marshall, the reason The Descent is one of the reasons that The Descent is the way it is that Neil Marshall thought Dog Soldiers was too funny, right? That he had gone too over the top. It wasn't scary enough. He ended up thinking he made a black comedy when he actually wanted to make basically what he said was in his heart was he wanted a tribute to 70s classics of horror. He wanted hard-hitting, brutal, survival, back to the basics horror, right? So he was like going Deliverance on everyone when he made The Descent, and then zombies were getting very, very very popular, suspiciously popular, right? We were heading towards the warm bodies era of zombiedom or whatever, and then the maestro comes out, George Romero, with what is really the end of the Dead sequence, right? Like,
yeah, that is
the real conclusion.
To me,
right? I mean, and you love Land of the Dead, but Land of the Dead is George Romero was always gritty. He always had that real feel that you sort of almost you were in his world, but you were like 98% in the world of the movie and 2% on set somehow. Right. You always felt you were sort of there with George, right? So I don't know how he conveyed that, but it was this amazing feeling. But he wasn't, he wasn't hanging out in the back, telling like everyone what to do and to get everyone running and getting stuff and not get his hands dirty or whatever. I mean, he was a filmmaker, right? So he was bringing some grit, and then it was just, to me, really the movie I was telling you about, the one that no one had really kind of talked about that I had seen in any substantial way, was The Jacket, right? Now, The Jacket is this amazing Adrian Brody sort of Jacob's Ladder-y horror film where Nick, Nick, listen to me, man. You know how you were telling me all the time about how Ryan Reynolds Buried, gets to you because of that claustrophobia, buried alive feeling?
Oh, yeah.
There's a guy in this movie who gets put into a morgue drawer, and they put you in the morgue drawer with them. And Nick, I swear to God, the only thing you can hear in the morgue drawer the first time you're introduced to it are his eyes. All you're hearing is eyes. I don't know how to explain it to you, but you're hearing that wet little eye looking back and forth is one of the creepiest sound moments. Ew. I'm telling you, man, it's so weird. But this is a very, very interesting movie. It's Keira Knightley. It's Adrian Brody. Like it's a very, very, very dark kind of thriller. Like I said, very Jacob's Ladder-y. But also was super gritty. And Adrian Brody, like, apparently really, he had the director, he wanted to do it right, so he had the director put him in the morgue drawer for real.
Oh my God.
And apparently he had kind of a mini breakdown
you think?
In the morgue drawer. And used it for the but he used it for the performance. But you know how you love in Split how James McAvoy is cycling through these different personalities? Well, there's sort of almost ahead of Christopher Nolan a little bit time jumpy thing going on where Adrian Brody has to play a very competent, very confident kind of problem solving guy, and then a completely shattered person who's just lost and has no idea, basically incapacitated. And he cycles through both of them, sometimes mid scene. And it's friggin' amazing. It's just amazing stuff. So there was a lot of gritty horror in 2005, and I love that it came back. Good.
You're talking about grit, and I have in front of me the popular horror movies from 2005, and all of the posters for everything that came out in 2005 looks like it needs to be power washed.
Right, it's like Saw 2, Devil's Rejects, Hard Candy, Wolf Creek. Wolf Creek is made out of dirt.
It needs a little detailed job.
Right?
On some of these dudes.
And Land of the Dead is literally about taking all the fancy people stuff and grinding it into the dirt, right? Like Devil's Rejects. I mean, come on. Exorcism of Emily Rose is not only is that a dirty, kind of exorcisms always get gross, right? You can't have the hand sanitizer, hand wipes version of exorcisms.
Also, I mean, if you just want to talk about pure grossness, Uwe Boll made a movie that year, It's not too far out.
Yeah, he's made of dirt too. So yeah, anyway, there's nothing else to say on this. I covered it. I sold it. It's not. Ultimately, I couldn't go with it as my number one because I think the number one is a clearer win. But I really do like that horror got gritty. All right, what you got for your silver medal second place?
All right, now I don't know if this is for better or for worse. But I'm gonna give my silver medal to 2005 European travel.
Oh my God, Hostel, hell yeah! Speaking of grit, all right, hit me. Tell me why this is.
Dude, I remember this was I was after reviewing what all came out in 2005. There are some undoubtedly good movies Descent, House of Wax, and Amityville Horror, but Hostel was probably one of the last movies I've ever had the not, I don't know, I don't want to say normie because I think that's kind of a cringy word, but the norm, I remember a newspaper article coming out in Springfield about this new horror film from the Cabin Fever guy called Hostel,
right?
And just the sheer hype around it,
totally.
And so and I'll never forget that experience of going to the movie theater at the mall that's way long gone now, that shit's been closed for years, and I think it was one of the first experiences I had of seeing a horror movie where people were yelling at the screen.
What were they yelling?
Just a lot of obscenities. Run, get out of there, that kind of shit.
That's amazing.
But it's funny. People always talk about Jaws made them scared to go into the water or something like that. I remember because I was looking up, I was 14 that year, and I remember I wasn't a jet setter at the age of 14. I wasn't traveling, hitting the world up, but I remember having that idea of what if Europe's like that? You know what I mean? It planted that seed of well, what? Let's just think this through for.
So European travel lost 2005.
That's why I said for better or worse. Regardless, even if you lose, we still got to pin that medal.
That's true. I agree. That's completely.
We still got to pin that medal.
It's funny. It's funny you flag that because that's interesting. It's always obviously a lot of this is determined by the age in which you encountered your formative horror things, right? But there was a sense that somehow Hostel made horror dangerous again a little bit on the mainstream side, right?
Yeah,
where it felt like one of those movies that might give someone a bad idea, right? And it had a bad reputation, so that's interesting that it happened because. Every marketing team for every horror movie ever made is trying to do that, and even if you get it, it doesn't mean that automatically your movie's good, right? Cannibal Holocaust probably got it, but it doesn't mean it's good. But it does mean that you got something that everyone's trying to get, and not a lot of people get there. And this movie definitely did that, so that's interesting.
And I also remember that time frame, Eli Roth made some other stuff, more recently. I'm not the biggest Eli Roth fan. It's sort of how I think we feel about like Rob Zombie. Like, you know, they have like the vast wealth of knowledge when it comes to horror movies, and you know, hearing them talk sometimes can be very very entertaining. You know, that last Eli Roth on Joe Bob was pretty
repetitive.
Pretty. I just remember all his answers were, you know, I think you'd have to ask the director and writer. But I also remember like 2005, like at that time, being like in middle school as like a horror fan, like Eli Roth's name like meant something back then.
Right. Yeah, totally.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that happens from time to time, and then there's a time where you just can't recapture it. Like in a weird way, you could say the same thing about Mystery Science Theater, right? There's a decent revival of it, and its offshoots do very entertaining things a lot of the times, but it's not what the same feeling you would have gotten from it at all if you had experienced it in real time when it blew up or when it was just on the other side of the afterglow of blowing up, right? Like it's a very unique thing, and Hostel had that vibe, and Eli Roth had the vibe with it, and he can't ever get that back. And you get other different vibes, and he's doing fine. No one has to help Eli Roth, but that's something that some people weirdly, I don't know how, like a David Lynch, I don't feel like David Lynch now is different from David Lynch at 30, right? And I don't feel like anyone processes David Lynch different now than David Lynch at 30, right? Or George Lucas for that matter, right? So some people aren't changing, but Eli Roth is definitely not what Eli Roth was then, for sure.
No. And, you know, I remember going into the theater for that film and being like, I'm gonna be so terrified, and then like it really wasn't that scary. It just had like a lot of cool like gore effects, and then I was like, oh, okay, well. And then I remember watching like a clip of Hostel 2 online, and I remember being like, I'm done.
Yeah, that was quick.
I'm good, but
that was quick. That's weird. I like Hostel 2 more than Hostel 1.
Do you really?
Yeah.
I was gonna ask if when's the last time you've like, because I haven't even. I mean, now that we're talking about it, when we're done recording this, I'm gonna like look back at some scenes from Hostel just to see how much they've aged, because it's been a long time since I.
Yeah, I haven't seen. I literally haven't seen them since I first saw them, but I remember that I thought Hostel 2 was more. It was kind of just a rerun of Hostel 1, but where you could tell someone had thought to themselves, you know, I don't think I did. I nailed A, B, D, and whatever. C I didn't do well, and E was missing, and then he just fixed it, right? So
yeah,
well, that was good.
The last thing I want to say about Hostel is, you know, one of the shows we really liked was Bravo's Top 100 Scariest Movie Moments, and I'm 100% sure Hostel's the reason why they did the 30 even scarier moments, because it was the number one pick for the 30 even scarier moments. You know, that's
a great point. I mean, it reigned supreme for that brief time, right?
I mean, it really had.
It was nothing was bigger than it. It was like the same 4 months that Alice in Chains had. No one was bigger than Alice in Chains in alternative rock for 4 months, and then it was over.
It is weird that they have The Grudge at number 30. Dude, they actually have. Listen to this. Number 28 on that list was Cabin Fever. So Eli Roth got to like pretty much start the list.
He bookended it, yeah.
Yeah, and end the list. And then it's weird. Basically, Bravo's 30 even scarier moments is basically half the films from 2005.
That's why this year is interesting.
So I'm pretty sure he's the reason why they did a second one.
I think that's probably that's probably right. All
No,
right, so I'm with that. I think that's actually better than my number 2. I'm not even going to talk that long about the number 2 one, because I want to get to the number 1 because I love it so much. But I think big name or famous actors who didn't usually act in horror movies won 2005. It's absurd when I looked across this. It was like Keanu Reeves, Dennis Hopper, Ryan Reynolds. Friggin' Kate Hudson made a horror movie in 2005, right? We were just talking about Adrian Brody was in it. That movie had Jennifer Jason Leigh, who does, you know, a decent amount of horror, but is still also considered, you know, kind of a mainstream actor.
Are you including Paris Hilton in this list for House of Wax?
Of course, naturally.
Okay,
naturally.
All right.
And I think the best performance of a legitimate actor who I think of as he's not quite as famous, but you would definitely know his face. Everyone would know his face, but they might not know his name. Is tied for me with someone I can't spoil because it's my number one choice. But Tom Wilkinson of Exorcism of Emily Rose, who was in Michael Clayton. He's like a Gary Oldman type of actor.
Oh yes, yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? I think he was in Moulin Rouge. Like that guy is in
like all of Guy Ritchie's movies.
Yeah, he's insanely talented, but you don't associate him with horror. But he he gives a great performance. There's just a lot of, Ryan Reynolds is all of a sudden playing Jack Torrance, like we were saying. Dennis Hopper, whose cigars were the biggest budget, I think, item on Land of the Dead. You got a star when your biggest day budget line item is, his cigars. It's just kind of a rich year I always like to see. I think I got it from my love of Hitchcock. You like to see an actor that people think of as like a Cary Grant type just all of a sudden wander in and do like a really extreme horror movie. Right? And not that these are necessarily really extreme or whatever, but I just thought that there was a pretty...
You don't think Robert De Niro and Hide and Seek... Hide and Seek...
What?
I think Hide and Seek's an extreme horror movie.
No, I don't think it's an extreme horror movie.
It's extreme... Well, you know what it was? It was extremely disappointing.
I mean, he did Cape Fear, so he's good on the horror side for me. But
it did make $127 million though. So
what are we laughing at?
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, I don't need to elaborate on this. I just think there are some years, and it would be interesting to go back and kind of like look. I didn't bother yet, but I will someday. To look over the years and just there's a couple times where all of a sudden you're like, wait, the best performance in horror was by who? Because usually it's one of ours, right? Usually it's the best horror performance is a Toni Collette or someone who's because even if someone comes in and does like a Jack Nicholson move in The Shining, they've done enough horror or dark themed movies where you really don't think of him as a horror actor, but you don't think of him as not a horror actor.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I know exactly.
But I absolutely did not think of Ryan Reynolds, Kate Hudson, and Adrian Brody as horror actors at the time. But
no, because when did The Pianist come out?
Right? That's what I'm saying.
Let me type it into Google, make sure I spell that right. Yeah, 2002. And I think he won like an Oscar for that, didn't he? Or he got nominated,
yeah, this guy's coming off of winning an Oscar. And that's Anthony Hopkins is the one that kind of blew in and, in the modern sense, kind of did that template of, we don't really associate whatever, but even he had Magic, which is one of the great horror movies of all time. And that's what I'm saying is it's rare to get someone who comes in where you just absolutely don't think of them as horror at all, like a Keanu Reeves, and all of a sudden they blow your mind with something they did. I mean, freaking Tilda Swinton's hanging out in the horror field way ahead of the time before her excellent vampire movie that comes much later. But anyway, so that it's an interesting year, and I'm curious if there's other years where it's a bunch of like actors you don't think associate with horror who kind of came in and did something great and then just left and never really came back to horror after that one time visit. All right, what you got? What's your next?
All right, my gold medal, my first place for who won 2005.
So this is the actual winner of horror.
This is the actual
in 2005.
Winner. And
who do you got?
So I was thinking of being funny and giving it to was it Madame Tussauds? What's that?
Madame Tussauds Max Museum, yeah.
Yeah. Just to goof and give a shout out. Actually, it's funny looking at this list. Like I do think House of Wax is probably my favorite horror movie, and I think it's because we just rewatched I Know What You Did Last Summer, and there's something about like, I don't know how to describe the vibe of those movies. Not great, but not terrible, but really entertaining. Like whatever that magic is. And I remember watching the DVD back in 2005 and, really digging it.
I have a theory about this era of horror. And it basically, I think to myself that you got to take, how Hammer and Universal had vibes. They had an atmosphere. You knew when you were in a Hammer movie. You knew when you were in a Universal horror movie at the height of it. And then even when Hammer tried to relaunch and do things like Women in Black, whatever, the first thing you were judging was, are they putting me back in that world, the atmosphere, like, right? So I think if you took all of the horror movies from that era you're talking about, like late 90s to early 2000s, they're an atmosphere, they're a vibe all together. It's like they all were working together to create this like blue-black, like sort of slick, sort of urban legendy, sort of a glossy, little bit tongue-in-cheek.
2005 was like,
right?
I think of it like, you know, like when the Earth was forming, it was like that molten, you know, hot mass before it cooled off and figured out what it was. That's 2005 is that year for horror for that decade.
That's such a good way to put that. That's exactly right.
You know, because and I'm glad you said that, because I've always, you know, being like, you know, 14, like, I don't know, that's like the prime age to like really dive into like, you know, something like horror. And what a confusing year.
Well, that's what I'm saying is I really, right around from like, I don't know when the faculty was, 97, 98, something like that. From that point to like 2005, maybe even a little past that, it just feels like we're all in the underworld castle, right? We're all hanging out with friggin' Kate Beckinsale, and all the movies have kind of that look and sound, and the characters are moving and fighting in that same way, and it's, I don't know, it's a weird.
You know what I think it is? I also think it's the fact that, you know, like around 1999, 2000, like I think 2005. I mean, that's when probably DVDs were most accessible. Like I think everyone by that time probably had like a PS2 or something like that could play a DVD. So I think it's also the fact that it's a complete format change. Like by 2005, I'm definitely not renting VHSs anymore.
That is so interesting.
Like I think the last VHS we rented that I remember, I know this isn't the last one, but it's the last one I have a very vivid memory of having, was, speaking of Robert De Niro, Meet the Parents, which was 2000. So 5 years later, maybe 2003 is when we stopped getting VHSs. I can't place it exactly, but I know by 2005 we were definitely done with them. So I think that format change has something to do with it, because Blu-ray didn't have the same effect, because you know, Blu-rays were widely accessible a few years later when the PS3 came out, and
Blu-rays were just in better DVDs. There wasn't a
and you would look at it and you'd be like, is it worth the extra like $22 for the Blu-ray? And you're like, nah.
Right.
So then it didn't catch on. So I really feel like it went from VHS, DVD to streaming. Like Blu-ray never really had a chance. But I think that's probably why those years felt so strange and weird to me. That's fascinating.
That's interesting. I think that's right. I think that's a big part of why those movies were like that.
Which is funny, because my winner, I didn't get to watch it when it first aired, but I got to see it through streaming.
Go figure.
Figure that out. So my number one winner for 2005 is horror anthologies.
Oh, good call.
There's no way. I mean, you know, I love short horror, like to me, there's nothing better than a good anthology. Like I'm a huge sucker for it. So I got to give it to Masters of Horror. Leading the way, because it's funny is it started airing late 2005, so not all of it made the cut. So there's actually 3 episodes, 1 2 3 4 5 episodes that didn't make the cut, and that's fine. Oh, actually Fair Hair Child aired January 6, 2006, and I remember really liking that one.
But when it was airing, it was the vibe of TV for horror. Like that's, I mean, that kind of,
like so let me read you the name of directors.
Yeah, I'm about to
who did season 1. I'll just do all season 1 for this, because it ended February 25th. That's fine. The next year doesn't start until March. Everyone knows that.
Everyone knows.
So you start with episode 1 with Don Casarelli. I think I said it right. So you start with that with the dude who did Phantasm and Bubba Hotep, which was another. When did Bubba Hotep come out? That had to be in that era, right?
Yeah. Definitely.
2002.
Yep.
Okay. Because that was another one of those movies where I was like, what is this? Okay. So then you go to my boy who directed Dagon, Stuart Gordon. Of course, he did more H.P. Lovecraft.
Of course.
for that. Then
he was the only one who could.
Yeah, who could do it successfully. And then the third episode, you got Toby Hooper, right? And then who's going to follow that? Dario Argento. Who's going to follow that? Mick Garris, right? Who's going to follow Mick Garris? You could almost guarantee, who's going to be next. Joe Dante. I feel like those dudes are joined at the hip. And actually, this third guy too, John Landis, followed Joe Dante. Guess who followed John Landis?
Wes Craven.
No, John Carpenter.
Wow.
And then what's funny is I was going to make a joke here. The guy who followed John Carpenter would be William Malone, but he actually did. At first I was like, who's that? And then I looked it up. He did the House on Haunted Hill remake.
Oh yeah. That's awesome.
And fear.com. And then Lucky McGee, he did that film May, which I always saw the poster for but never saw.
Oh, May is awesome.
Larry Conan followed him up.
Yep.
And then John McNaughton, that guy did Henry for Portrait of a Serial Killer. And then the last one, the guy I would never go get a manicure pedicure with, Takashi Miike, rounded it out. And honestly, I don't know if there's ever been, there have been good horror anthologies since. We had Aaron Kuntz on from Scare Package. We really enjoyed that. Of course, there's Trick or Treat and you got the VHS series and that kind of stuff. Shudder's Creep Show unfortunately doesn't count. Which they are advertising a new season, and I'm like, why are you gonna do this to me, guys? Why are you gonna do this to me? You're gonna release another season. It's probably not gonna be, that good. But which is funny because I did buy some Creep Show merch, but it doesn't look like. But it doesn't look. It's not Shudder's Creep Show. It's just regular Creep Show. It has the old stuff on there. But I don't think there's been anything as ambitious since Masters of Horror. And what the other good thing about it is that they titled it Masters of Horror, and then they literally went out and got the Masters.
And they did it right. That's so often not what happens.
Even if you don't like all of them, I remember I watched a few that I thought were just okay, but it was cool to see an actual master in the genre. Take a stab.
I gotta tell you, man, I love horror anthology books. I will buy them on any subject, and I read all the classics like the Shadow series and all that. But even the themed ones Haunted House or Vampire Anthology or whatever it is, I love that stuff, right? But the best anthologies aren't the one where they're end to end good. Let me tell you. Yeah. Let me say, over time, you think that's what you want. As a consumer, you think I'm giving you my money. I'm giving you my money. I want 12. Great stories because, but the ones the books that you'll cherish, the ones you really remember are the ones that have two of the best you've ever encountered and a couple of what the hell are these? All right. For some reason, because it's an anthology, it does better by giving itself that room to be whatever it wants to be, Yeah. I mean, it's like us during a work week. Sometimes you're on, sometimes you're off. Sometimes you're on your game, sometimes you're not.
Okay, so he's pretty much knocked out my love for Masters of Horror and how I think it was the...
Well, you cheated is what happened. Yeah, I was trying to be I got a Neil Marshall. And you're like, oh, yeah, I'm going to come from the top rope and hit you with John Carpenter.
George,
list of amazing talent.
You need to remember to expect the unexpected. That's just a tale as old as time, song as old as rhyme. you know what I mean?
Well, that's a pretty good winner of horror, but I have.
Oh, geez!
You always do this when we play poker.
By the way, this is what you always do this when we play poker, and you have the worst tell, and I fall for it every time. You go,
No. I think your answer is better this time. I don't think it's a question of that. I think it's more. To me, it's not about that. It's that my scorecard reads it a little differently because. I have the winner of 2005 in horror as The Devil,
Pretty sneaky, sis.
And I'm gonna try to argue this because of the Halley's Comet rarity of what actually happened here in this year that we don't really talk about as horror fans, right? Because if I was to tell you, like, what could you make it a difficulty level of like 9, right? I mean, a difficulty level of remaking something like House on Haunted Hill is like a 6 because it's a classic and it's got a classic irreplaceable actor. It's actually got a few of them, but as long as you have a fun haunted house horror vibe to something, there's a big chunk of horror fans that are going to like that, right? So, but to do what was going on here is kind of remarkable. So first of all, it is almost impossible to conceive of making a good exorcism movie in the year 2005, right? Like Blair Witch and all that, and The Exorcist and everything that had come before it, just showed you that the odds were, if you were like hearing a rumor that horror was about to drop a new exorcism movie on you, you were way more likely to get the devil inside than you were to get something good.
That's true.
Or you're going to get the right, or you're going to get something medium like Deliver Us from Evil, which is okay, but not, anything exciting, right? And if you're going to get something great, it's not going to be an exorcism level great, right? It's going to be, we'll make it great, but we'll make it great in a way where it's, demons, but now James Wan is hitting you with his twist of demons, and now you're just in the Waniverse, and you're not even thinking about it as an exorcism movie anymore.
No, right? You're running backwards, trying to cut out the cancer. See our last episode if you want to know how we found
exactly. Call out to the last episode. But Exorcism of Emily Rose is a really incredibly well-made horror movie, but it's also a courtroom drama. And it found a new idea in the exorcism formula. And that happens about as often as you'd think it would, right? Because even the good kind of takes on exorcism. They don't do anything that really shocks you or you haven't seen before. Even Exorcism 3, which we all love, and I think is a far better movie than Exorcism of Emily Rose, just, pound for pound. Its twist on it is it's 2 actors instead of 1. He's one person inside of someone else. And that idea, to be honest, is kind of dumb. Yeah. The reason it works is because those actors are goddamn amazing, right?
Right.
So they pull it off because it gives you an excuse to have these hauntingly incredible performances. But Jennifer Carpenter in Exorcism of Emily Rose just she was a special effect in and of herself on top of
I was going to say,
right?
I was definitely planning on interrupting you to say Jennifer Carpenter won 2005 because she went from that movie to Wreck, the American remake.
Yep.
And then around that same time, I think is when she was doing Dexter.
Right.
So, a little bit after that, I think. So, she
was on a streak, right?
Yeah,
so then the devil has like one of the best actors working in their pocket. They have a really incredible performance from Tom Wilkinson as a doing 2 things, doing a traditional exorcism movie, but doing a court, almost like a 12 Angry Men thing, right? And my heart, there's a book called The Son of the Endless Night by John Ferris, who's a great horror writer. He's actually one of Stephen King's.
Sick title.
It's a great title. And
wow.
He's one of Stephen King's favorite writers, actually. A lot of people think he's a formative influence on King. And he busted out this incredible book, but it's like 800, 900 pages long. It's a giant.
Oh, wow.
It's one of those huge books, but it's weird that it's worth it. But I remember reading it and just being baffled by what the hell is this, because it felt like reading Law and Order for big chunks of it. It was so strange. But then when they dragged the devil into the courtroom, in that book, the devil's actually on the stand, and he reveals himself on the stand, right?
Wow.
So it's a very interesting.
Did he
dynamic.
did he say the thing that they always make you say in court? You swear to tell the truth, nothing but the truth, so help me God. He looks in the camera and goes, yes. Sure.
That would have been awesome. So not only did the devil get this, but bearing the lead, the devil gets Peter fucking Stormare doing Constantine. One of, if not the greatest performance as the devil in cinema, like ever, right? And this is someone who had to stand toe to toe with Walter Houston from Devil and Daniel Webster, and Pacino and De Niro and Angel Heart, and just a cavalcade of incredible performances. Viggo Mortensen, Prophecy, which is an amazing one. Like, there's a lot to compete with here, but this is an incredible portrayal of the devil, just like unforgettable. And he's such an interesting actor, one of my favorites. So the devil gets the great representation in the form of Peter Stormare, and a great ambassador in the form of Governor Carpenter. So basically, after taking a real reputation nosedive after the Satanic Panic, and being made ridiculous in a lot of like bedazzled and Little Nicky situations.
They gave the devil a little ass.
The devil showed
mid-2000s.
Devil and South Park. The devil showed some teeth again, finally. So the fact that he was able to make a comeback, or she, whatever you want to call it, I think it's an incredible year for the devil, and that's always good for horror fans.
Yeah, no, I think anthologies and the devils are pretty. Those are or Masters of Horror and the devil are two pretty
solid places,
pretty killer things to win a year, to be honest.
But I don't think. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I was really excited when I didn't know you were saying Masters of Horror, and that's a pretty goddamn interesting thing to think about, because you forget. Yeah. Well, the weird thing is, it's almost like you have to time travel, right? Because now we just assume that the quality on TV and TV shows is going to be better, if not better, at least as good as movies. But back then, that would have been like a real sucker punch. So no one would have expected the best thing in horror to be on TV, right? That
Seriously,
wasn't how they were feeling about it in 2005. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, what a kind of an interesting year. So I think you're just as curious as I am as to the people on Facebook. Are you still listening
for
Facebook?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. If you're right, exactly. If you're following the page, come tell us what you think it won the year.
Well, if they're listening on Facebook, they can just comment. That's the cool thing.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, they cut out the middleman. You can just do it.
If that's where you're hearing this, just drop us a comment and let us know. There's two things that I'm curious about. One is who won horror 2005 by your lights, which would be really interesting. The other one is what year should we do next? Right.
That's good.
I'd love to get a nomination or get some votes on to see, because I mean, if it's an overwhelming vote, we'll just do what you guys pick. So I'm really curious to see what year people would find interesting, where it's not like just blindingly obvious who won the year. I don't think there's that many of those years. Some of them that even look like that aren't that, right? I don't think. You would think Jaws won 75, but you can make the not quite horror argument. You could find some other really amazing stuff at 75.
Well,
so.
I'll tell you this: every episode I talk about iTunes reviews, we hit 50 finally.
Oh, shout out to round numbers.
Shout out to round numbers. And if you're listening on Facebook and you really, really enjoyed it, an iTunes review is always pretty helpful. So hopefully you're listening on Facebook. I'm sure you'll be seeing more of our posts there, because we know for a fact the podcast is being pumped out through Facebook more so than iTunes. Yeah,
go figure how we would end up in that world where iTunes wasn't as viable as
right?
Facebook Watch, which I still have trouble finding on my phone.
It is very weird. It's
a weird world, but
I know.
But absolutely, let us know what you think, and I'm also really curious about the what they thought won, especially if it's not just a single movie or artist or book, because there's going to be some fun notions in there, I am sure.
Exactly. Cool. Well, until next time, stay scary, watch a bunch of horror movies, and we'll talk to you guys next time.
Bye.